Hello, I'm Tom McNamara, host of Arizona Illustrated. From 1941 to 1945, Germany's Nazi regime murdered two-thirds of the Jewish population in Europe. Of the 6 million Jewish people who were lost in the genocide, about 1.5 million were children. Now, against all odds, some children managed to survive, and some of those survivors ultimately made their way here to southern Arizona. Their photos as adults now hang on the wall here at the Tucson Jewish Museum and Holocaust Center. Some endured years of deprivation, starvation, and abuse in concentration camps. Some managed to hide or pass for Gentiles, or found people who helped them. Others fled with their families, becoming refugees with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Over the past few months, Arizona Public Media has collected the harrowing true life accounts from 18 of Southern Arizona's child Holocaust survivors. Their experiences describe the brutality they witnessed and the acts of kindness that saved their lives. Here is one of those stories.
Tucson resident Wolfgang Hellpap was born in 1931.
I was born in Berlin, Germany, to a Jewish father, a Christian mother. My father was a very strict Jew. He had me registered in a Jewish community center in Berlin, and he also had my birth, so he wanted to really have me to be Jewish. I mostly lived with my mother, though, because my father had another family, see? So he just came a lot of times to visit us. It was not 1933, and the Nuremberg laws in Germany started to come out. People started getting all worked up about it, the Hitler started, and the Hitler Youth, where they had these shiny little uniforms, So as I was growing up, I was looking at that and I figured, maybe why can't I get into one of those uniforms, They look so brilliant, with medals and stuff. So, you're 4 or 5 years old. You really don't know here or there, but since that was now the theme in Berlin especially, all the flags and banners and, Hitler's speeches and the brown shirts marching around, the impressions were just too great sometimes, So I didn't really realize yet what's going on, All that was just the parades and stuff was great for me, 5 years old. So anyway, at 6 years old, my mother put me in a school, elementary. No, she was not aware either that Jews cannot even go to schools, but the Nuremberg laws were not that enforced yet, They were there, but it's not that strict yet. But anyway, so I attended first class, got into second class, then came the hammer, the teacher one day had a list, and was sitting there, and she says, according to our laws, our leaders, Adolf Hitler and our superiority, all Jews have to be removed from school right now. And we have one Jew here. And she called my name, And of course I was crying. And the other kids would start yelling and screaming at me, dirty Jew. And it was just horrible at that experience, I was 6, 7 years old. And feeling that, so that was the first encounter that I had with that kind of regime, that took over in Germany. So I got just to leave the school right now. So I ran out crying, and some kids came after me and trying some stones and stuff, spitting. And now with some of these kids were in the Hitler Youth, so I was running from them, really. So now I knew. I got to my mother's and started crying and telling her, what happened to me in school. At that time, too, the Gestapo told her that I have to wear the Star of David on the outer garments, If I don't wear that, they really take me away immediately. So I had that star on my garment all the time. At that time, we couldn't even keep the apartment. The landlord told us we have to move. So we finally found another place, but that was a lady with her sister that has an apartment, and she says we can have one room, one room in her apartment.
The Night of Broken Glass, Kristallnacht, was orchestrated by the Nazi militia called the Brown Shirts. 7-year-old Wolfgang watched from his apartment window as mobs destroyed Jewish homes, synagogues, and businesses. They dragged Jews onto the streets and beat them.
The hooligans, all the looters and stuff, they're roaming to the streets and carrying those flags and, brown shirts. They pushing people, and the common people were, all screaming in the streets, the Heil Hitler, and stones were thrown around, and glass was shattering in Jewish stores. I was so scared. I knew by now that they were persecuting me too.
Wolfgang's father was named Max Herschel. On Kristallnacht, his business was completely destroyed. Then the German police insisted that Jews had to pay to clean up the damage. So he decided to leave Germany. China was one of the few countries that welcomed Jews. He and his wife and their children fled to Shanghai.
I never saw my father again, no. 1941, yeah, the Gestapo came to all of a sudden. They cleaned up everywhere. Jews were now deported. German Jews were all deported, put into cattle cars and gone away. So my name came up with them too, So they came to the house, and they told my mother, they said, we're taking him, but we're not taking him to a camp. He's going to go into an orphanage. In 1942-43, the Nazis started deporting our kids too. So what they did, they came in the middle of the night. They usually came, and they had the list, of the kids that they're gonna take. 9, 10 years old, I was shivering in my bed, thinking, I hope they don't call my name. One of my tasks was in the orphanage sometimes babysitting on these little kids, because I was a little bigger already. I had some babies that I liked very much already. 1943, one day the Nazis decided they're going to dissolve the whole orphanage, So SS came in. And so when they came, they started crying and screaming. And so they take a machine gun and start to shoot. They just killed them right there. And the rest of us, they took it into trucks, And there was a big assembly point in Berlin. There was hundreds of people, maybe even 1,000 people were already there waiting for deportation. The vehicles, the trains, they were already ready there to push them in and take them to camps, And here was with 2 other guys, who we survived, and I'm looking, and the other guy says too, he's looking, there's a little wall there, not too high, You think we can get over that? And the other guy, I don't know, but the SS is looking everywhere. I said, well, what can I say? Let's try. And we ran through that wall, got over it, and we're gone, But at the time, I start looking back, I saw one SS soldier, he saw us. He didn't shoot. He did not shoot. So we got over that wall and back in the streets, And of course, I couldn't run to my mother's place because I knew if I ran there, that's where they're going to look first, So I knew one uncle, he had a little spread outside of Berlin. I took off and it was a long way to go there. I couldn't take any transportation or anything, I just, in the meantime, I also kept my star on here, because I figured if a policeman see, maybe I'd be in bigger trouble, like that. So I finally made it to my uncle, but he had two girls. One girl was already 14, 15 years old, and she was also in the Hitler Youth. My uncle was very strict. He was against that Nazi regime in the end. So he told them, you're not going to tell anybody that you have your cousin over here now, And he told me he had a little water hole there in the backyard. He says, you're going to hide in there during the daytime, especially because the neighbors, otherwise, they're going to be thinking, what is that kid running around in daytime, not in school? Allies started to bomb Berlin, and I couldn't even go anywhere else in a shelter or anything like that, because with my star on as Jew. One day, bomb fell not far from that. I mean, it was really scary, And so my uncle, he says, it's better you can't stay no more, It's too dangerous for you to stay.
He left his uncle's house and went to hide with friends of the family, but they could only keep him for a few months.
I didn't have any place more to go. So any time the bomb side, I couldn't go in the shelters and stuff, so I was just hiding in places where they smashed from the bombings, So I was hiding there like being homeless, But of course, my mother was always trying to keep track of me, and she bought me food and things like that, And she says, no matter what now, Berlin is bombed. You come to my place now, you stay with me. Keller with the other people. And then we saw a Russian tank came down the street. Slowly coming, So they told me, go out there. So I did. I ran out the cell. I went there, and it was a Russian lieutenant or something. And he saw my star, so he kept screaming, Hitler's dead, Hitler taught, Hitler dead. And he embraced me, and that was my liberation there.
The full interview with Wolfgang Hellpap will be available on Arizona Public Media's website, azpm.org, along with stories of 17 other child survivors of the Holocaust. And thank you for watching PBS 6.